parts of Yellowstone National Park are still closed after historic flooding hit the park. In Yosemite, thousands-year-old trees were spared after a massive fire. Ray Sauvajot is the Associate Director of Natural Resource Stewardship and Science for the U.S. National Park Service. Ray, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
So what's the mission of the Natural Resource Stewardship and Science Directorate?
Well, our directorate follows directly with the mission of the National Park Service, of course, and the mission of the National Park Service is to protect resources in national parks unimpaired for enjoyment of current and future generations. And specifically within our programs under natural resources, we work to understand natural resources, to restore them, and to ensure that the resource values, and particularly the natural resource values, can persist and be available over time for people to enjoy both now and into the future.
So the National Park Service has a climate change response strategy. Briefly tell us what's in that strategy.
Yes, so climate change, of course, is a significant issue that affects national parks all across the country. And we have a strategy that has 4 key focus areas. One of those is science, understanding how climate change affects the resources in national parks. So using scientific information to help frame our understanding of how climate change will have effects on national park resources. The second is adaptation, to use the information about our understanding of climate change to develop strategies to respond. What should we be doing to help our national parks adapt to or respond to the effects of climate change? A third focus area is what we call mitigation, and that is to ensure that our own activities are sustainable and are, to the best of our ability, helping to reduce the climate footprint of the activities of the national park system. And then finally, communication, a fourth focus area within our climate change response strategy. And that is essentially to use the national parks as windows to understanding climate change and to talk to people and stakeholders, the public, visitors, and so forth about the effects of climate change on national parks and the ways in which we are both hoping to understand and working to understand, and also then responding to and adapting to the effects of climate change.
So Ray, I mean, aside from strategy, which is definitely important, you know, these natural disasters are happening more often right now. So how is the Park Service adapting to that reality and protecting the parks from those disasters?
Yes, well, of course, it's difficult to attribute a particular weather event as being the cause or being caused by or the consequence of climate change, but we know that recent weather events that have impacted national parks, such as high-intensity storms or extended drought conditions, coastal flooding, for example, these are all predicted, they're all expected from what we would anticipate from a changing climate. And so it's imperative that the National Park Service recognize these threats, these risks, and understand how they are becoming more prevalent in order to protect resources. And so understanding vulnerability is key. So we're spending a lot of time now working to understand which of our resources are especially vulnerable to these effects. So conducting vulnerability analysis, focusing on the resources themselves, but also then coupling that with projections of the effects of climate change. So where are we going to expect the effects of climate change to be most prevalent, to be of greatest concern, and then use that information to develop strategies to respond to climate change. And those strategies may be, you know, how we are working to manage particular resources in parks. It may include things like how are we developing facilities and infrastructure that may serve visitors in national parks, but all of that recognizing the vulnerability of those assets and those resources and the projections that climate change would create and affect national parks.
All right, well, let's talk about those resources, because the recently signed Inflation Reduction Act includes nearly $1 billion for national parks. How will that money be used?
Well, we are in the process now of working to understand exactly how those funds are going to be distributed. And so that is a topic of lots of work and efforts now. The National Park Service in particular is especially interested in boosting the work that we're doing around vulnerability analysis. We're very interested in coupling what are called downscale models of the effects of climate change on national parks, and then using that information to apply it to adaptation, resilience, the kinds of actions we need to take in order to protect resources and ensure that parks are available for future generations. The specifics of how those dollars are going to be allocated is a work in progress, but we're excited about the opportunity to have resources to really tackle these challenges in national parks.
Well, speaking of challenge, I want you just to look ahead and tell me what's the greatest challenge do you think is facing the national parks with respect to climate change efforts?
One of the big challenges is how we decide when intervention or action is necessary. The National Park Service, as you probably know, we tend to be an agency that takes a more hands-off approach in terms of how resources and how the natural environment operates. But when you have an effect like climate change, where the actions of humans are affecting what's going on in a national park, that then points to the importance of the National Park Service, doing as much as it can to try to mitigate or intervene in some way. But sometimes that becomes really difficult. And so we're struggling now and working hard to determine when are we in a position to resist changes that occur from climate change, and in some cases maybe accept those changes, and then in other instances maybe direct how those changes may affect resources.
We're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.